You're listening to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks so much for joining us today in this very special episode.
I'm so excited about today.
We have some really fantastic friends and guests with us today. So
I'm looking forward to this one. It's such a great testimony of the power of God and the love of God.
And you don't have to just listen to us.
Yeah, isn't that good?
You get extra stuff. So I'd like to introduce to everyone, this is Leah and Kris, and they're just some really special people to us, which is why I think Bron and I are so excited to have this opportunity. And they're going to share a bit of their story and their testimony, which is really powerful.
Yeah, it's one you're not going to want to miss for sure.
Yeah. So say hi to everyone, you guys.
Hi all.
Hi everyone.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we've been looking forward to it.
All right. So I guess by way of introduction, how did we get to know each other? So this starts back, I don't even know the year. It must have been about 2012.
About 13 years ago.
Yeah.
13, wow.
Yeah, about 2012, something like that. I had just stepped into a new role at the church I was in called the Life Center, and I was doing ministry and inner healing and that sort of thing with folks. And I just remember getting these random calls from a lady, and she would call me up, and I had no idea how she got my phone number. Maybe you can tell us that a little bit of that backstory. But I just remember talking with you, Leah, and you were looking for help. You knew that you needed some healing. You needed God to intervene in your life. And I remember, I think we talked probably a half dozen times before you ever even told me your name.
Yes.
Like you would talk to me, but you wouldn't even tell me your name. You were so cautious with that. And I just thought, what is going on? And I remember I would hang up and just go, oh, I just wish I knew her name and we could connect and all that. But eventually you did tell me your name. We built some trust even over the phone, and you told me your name. But you would ask me, I remember, I think it was really quick. The very first phone call, it was like, hi, and you said hello. And it was almost like this very quick, do you know anything about Satanic ritual abuse or SRA ministry? Yes. And I'm like, okay, my ears are turned on.
I'm awake.
Yeah. And I had been exposed to this ministry a little bit, but not very much at that point. And I said, yes, I know what that is. I know a little bit about it. And so we entered into this conversation. But it was, I don't know, 6 months, a year maybe before I ever met you in person. And it started this journey. We started a journey together of healing and seeing God work in your life. And it's been topsy-turvy at times. There's been many tears. There's been many laughs.
Lots of laughs.
Lots of laughter, lots of jokes, lots of tears as well.
Lots of food.
And
Yes,
lots of food.
Lots of food.
Yes, I owe at least 5 kilograms to you guys. But it has been this journey of learning for me and seeing what God is capable of and pushing past maybe even fears or insecurities that I have to just really wait on God and see him do something. And it's been this journey of healing and hope and restoration for you guys, which is just so incredible, which is why I'm just brimming with excitement today to tell a bit of this story and hear your story. And I think it's a story people need to hear. Now, I might warn you, some of this is pretty extreme stuff, and we're not going to necessarily talk in graphic details about things, but I will say the things that you have been through are really significant. And I bring that up because a lot of people, when they start to hear this, they want to back away.
Yes.
They want to turn away. They want to go, ooh, that's too much for me. But that's not what God asks us to do. And I'll finish and kind of start to put it over to you guys with this. I remember I felt that way early in the beginning. And I remember we were going to actually, we had met and done a little bit of ministry, and we were going to come to your house. I think your daughter was turning 3, and we might talk about the significance of that later. But I was going, oh, I've got this young family. You've been involved in some pretty dark stuff, and do I expose my family? It's one thing, I'm the pastor guy, and it's one thing to do that, but do I bring my whole family to their house? I don't really know. And God spoke really clearly to me, and this is an encouragement to everybody listening. He said, just love them. Show them love and just love them. Don't worry about the details. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Just love them. And I said, okay, I will do that, God. I will just love them. And I made that commitment, and we went over, and since then we've had this beautiful friendship. Like it's not just been pastor client or pastor and churchgoer person. It's been this friendship that has blossomed, and you guys, I would say, have blessed us as much as we've blessed you. Like, so it's definitely not been a one-sided thing. It's definitely been something that goes back and forth, where you've blessed me, I've blessed you, and it's been this beautiful friendship that's emerged. So lovely, lovely day and lovely opportunity. Here we go. I'll start with you, Leah.
Yes.
Tell me just a bit about your background. Like, tell us a little bit about like where you grew up, and
Sure.
maybe some details about your family.
Sure. Well, firstly, I just want to address something that you said. We would dispute that it's been an equal relationship, in the sense that we've contributed as much, because in the 13 years, Kris and I could very easily say that your willingness to hear from God and to love us in the midst of the chaos, the darkness, the frustration, the horrific story has saved my life and saved our marriage. Because if it wasn't for you, and you also, Bron, I said to Kris the other day, I think Bron was the first person to make us a meal in the midst of that, trying to juggle life with 3 kids, Kris's work, and negotiating trauma was so extremely hard. So to have somebody who listened, asked questions, and offered whatever they could to help and
didn't run away.
Yeah, exactly. Who
Asked
didn't
questions,
run away.
Sat there, heard the answers, and didn't run away.
Because, like you said, Eric, people's first response to a story like mine and ours is, well, how does this affect me? How does this affect my family? Am I going to get any spiritual pushback from even being involved? Kris and I would often joke like that we had spiritual cooties, like that people were afraid of catching by having anything to do with us, because that was the response we were getting. Yeah, there were a number of situations where people would hear not even the whole story, but a little bit of the story, and be like, yeah, we're not having anything to do with you. And all we wanted was help and support. And I remember there was one woman I asked to mentor me in this process, because I very much loved Jesus and very much wanted to be free and do the right thing. And I had one woman, and her first response was, well, how is your story going to affect me and my family? And that was it. There was nothing after that. And I remember very early on in our journey, we had a friend who was watching our 3 young children, and because I wasn't in a good place, she'd offered to look after the kids. We'd dropped our 3 young children at her house. She also had young children our kids' age. And in the process of us doing an emergency prayer ministry session with another pastor and his wife, her son fell off the couch and broke his leg. And that was blamed on us. That was, well, that's your fault because it's the spiritual kickback from us being involved with you. And our pastor agreed with her.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's even in us seeking help, it was, well, we weren't seen as safe because of where we were coming from.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really tough.
That's pretty damaging for you guys.
I don't think the relationship was ever the same after that. Before that time, we were, I would say, reasonably close with that family. But for, I guess, their peace of mind and maybe some of ours, we didn't want to be held accountable or responsible for anything else happening in the future. We just really stepped back. We never really called on them again or placed them in a position again where something could happen, and then that would be something else that we did or because of us happened or because of the spiritual stuff happened. So we really pulled back from that relationship, and probably we have held on to that reluctance.
And been very guarded in who we associate and seek help from, and that's probably, Eric, part of the not telling you the name early on too, is we were trying to determine who was safe, who wasn't safe.
For sure.
Who could we seek out, who wouldn't pass judgment. And that's a really difficult journey to navigate.
So, Leah, tell us a bit about your childhood and how you grew up.
Sure. I thought that I had a really normal childhood. Like, I grew up in Far North Queensland, had 7 siblings. So we were quite a large family. Mum was at home with us and Dad was a truck driver. We were very much that generation where you went out in the morning. If you weren't at school, you went out in the morning and you came home when the street lights came on, we lived where
Gen X. Gen X.
we had this big gully near our home, which had a creek in the bottom, and I had 7 built-in playmates. So we would just disappear down there. We would catch fish in the creek and, play and wander off all over the place. And where we lived, it rained a lot. So playing in the gutters that were full of water was a common occurrence. So, I thought it was normal. But then when you have a look at it, it's like, by today's standards even, it wasn't healthy. Like, my father was very angry. There was a lot of yelling, I remember, from my childhood, a lot of things getting smashed on the floor. And Mum was very not present, like just in her room a lot, or not in the same space the kids were. Mm-hmm. And just some of the games, like it's not like there was sitting around the table playing board games. I remember we would play games like Vampires in the Dark, and our house was quite large and very dark. And it was, you'd have to tiptoe and sneak through the darkness, and a vampire would come out and get you was a common game. And there was another one called Grandma's Attic. And it's kind of like the sticks game. I'm not sure if you ever played it growing up, where you would place the sticks out and you would jump over so many and you'd have to reach back and put one at the front and you'd play. Does anybody know that game?
I don't know that one.
Oh.
No. Sorry.
Well, it was a childhood game where you would move the sticks according to how far you jumped. And then at the end, it's like there was a winner. But for us, we would play the game with the sticks, but then at the end, whoever was last, the devil would get you. We would play these games, so-called games, which, just were quite not light and funny.
There was the Cowboys and Indians where you actually tied up the, I can't remember, you were tying up the cowboy or tying up the Indian, but where they actually gathered the wood and were going to burn you at the stake.
That was my sister, set my sister on fire. Yeah. But that was just, a lot of young kids getting up to just mischief when they...
rambunctiousness.
Yeah, when they weren't being supervised. So, I just thought that stuff was normal. Looking back now, it was a very dysfunctional household. Not a lot of, love and care by today's standards, really.
You were raised by your older sister.
Yeah, I was pretty much raised by my oldest sister instead of my mother. I remember any memories I do have, my older sister tended to be there rather than my mum. My mum was never a comforting figure or a caring figure or anything like that. She was
not
there.
Very maternal.
Yeah, she was there for the meals and to remind you to take a shower. Yeah, and other than that, it's not like we were a close-knit family. But in all honesty too, I didn't have a lot of memories of my childhood. I had really broken snippets of growing up in this house with these people, and I thought that was normal too. So when then I was older and went to uni and started meeting with people and they would share stories about their childhood and their family, I was like, but I don't remember that. There was just very few memories of my childhood.
Yeah, Bronwyn's that way. You can ask her who her grade 4 teacher was, and she goes, "Oh, that's Miss Phillips," and we blah blah blah. She can rattle those things off. It kind of amazes me. I don't remember all those names either.
And I had very, very few memories of my family. Mm.
So at some point, did you come down to Brisbane for uni?
Yes.
And so this is how you've come to Brisbane?
Yes. I left home at 17. I got a position in university, came down here. And even in that, it was pretty much like my family just came and just put me here and then were gone. So from that point, I was very alone and very isolated and just had to do life on my own, had to kind of fend for myself, get myself through uni, really look after myself. I was living in a share house with 2 other women, and it was just quite a lonely, horrible time, really.
Yeah. And we haven't specifically sort of said what has happened with you. We've kind of talked around it and made some inferences, but just as we're going forward, so people are not sitting here guessing, you basically grew up in a generational satanic family and consequently had abuse as part of that association. And it obviously left a lot of trauma and a lot of wounds in your life. And so that's a bit of what we're sharing in these podcasts, because we know these are going to be more than one to tell your story.
Yes.
But you endured some incredible stuff, which is partly why the memories are kind of blacked out. It's because we often go through a survival mechanism where we black out really traumatic things so we can survive them. But what it does is it leaves us without those distinct memories. But oftentimes we start to realize those memories start to come back eventually, and we start to realize those things. So,
well, can I just backtrack to that point about growing up in that? I didn't realize till much later what I had actually grown up in, because to all appearances, we grew up in church. Like, we, from a very young age, moved between the Brethren Church, the Baptist Church, the Pentecostal church. We were raised in church. So you would look at our family and think, oh, they were a good Christian family. But as we went through and we started my journey and then walked through my journey, what we came to realize was they were actually a cover for all of the other stuff happening behind the scenes, all the satanic stuff. And in fact, a number of people involved in those churches were actually also involved in the occult.
Or the perpetrators, yeah.
Yeah, so which of course adds to the confusion and the pain. And in many ways I felt like, you know that Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show?
Yeah.
Where he realizes his whole life is a lie. That was one of my biggest struggles, was I came to this point where I just thought, but wait a minute, like none of it's true. Like everybody else knew that my life was a lie, but me, like everybody was in on the secret. But instead I've been raised in this horrific environment. All the while the shop front was church and, you know, just pleasantries, and that made it even more difficult.
So I don't know if I know this. When did you start to realize things were not as they seemed? Do you remember how old you were, or was there a catalyst? Did something happen that you suddenly kind of went, light bulb moment, okay, not everything is as it appears?
I think there was always an awareness that something wasn't quite right. But once again, I just thought that was part of life. As a teenager, I started cutting already. I knew I wasn't coping, but had no support to process that really. I would find medicines in the medicine cupboard that, you know, like strong painkillers that would help you to zone out and just help you to feel sick. So it's like you didn't have to engage. So there was always those kind of things. And there was always the rumblings of something doesn't quite fit. Like there was always the stories in our house, which were kind of like jokes. My uncle from my dad's side would talk about how we had grown up in my grandfather's house. So my dad's parents had owned the house before we had bought it and moved into it. And my uncle would talk about how furniture would move all on its own and how these things would happen in this house which were not natural. And then there was other things, like my father would talk about how his grandfather had beaten a horse to death out of anger because he just wasn't happy. So these kinds of things were almost joked about. And then my father would make these, like every now and then we'd sit around the table and he would tell these stories, like scary stories. And at one point he talked about, not at one point, I remember one specific point, but it was a story that was joked about often, was babies being buried in our backyard.
Yeah.
And you kind of, when you go through my story and you kind of learn what we went through, you kind of go, was that a joke?
Yeah.
Were they joking? Or, you know, but it just kind of became the norm. Like it was okay because it was made funny. And then my sister, there's 7 years difference, I think, between my oldest sister and I. And when I was in my teens, so still living at home, she had just gotten married and was talking about her story. What happened is when she got married, it started to come out that she had been dedicated to Satan as a toddler. And she would just tell me all of this stuff. She would share this stuff with our other sister, and it kind of never really went anywhere in the regard that she confronted mum and dad and said, this is what I remember happened. What's the deal with that? And they said that it had nothing to do with them. They had left her with a friend of theirs to babysit for the day, and that the friends had done it. Mm-hmm. And my sister kind of accepted that, took time away from the family to heal, but then it's almost like there was an alienation because she was confronting that. Then it was just left. Like
it's
it just
interesting that they didn't
ignored.
deny it. They actually said, yes, it happened, but it wasn't us.
But it wasn't us,
Yeah.
exactly. And then never really addressed it again. And it's like my brothers and sisters knew as well. They'd all heard the story, but nothing was done with it. It was like, oh, that happened? Okay. And we move on. We move on. And when she stepped back to heal, it was like, well, that's not okay. So it's like she was almost forced back into the fold and to just be quiet about it, even though we all knew.
Yeah.
So all of that was happening then,
Yeah.
but it was just like, ho-hum, this is just family stuff. You know, families go through this stuff. And
Sure. Well, I mean, as you know, I sometimes have a bit of a dark sense of humor and whatever else, but when you start joking about babies in the backyard, that's a whole different level. That's
Yeah,
a whole
totally.
different thing. And so there were signs, I guess you could say. There were signs that something was not right.
Of course, but you don't really see all of those signs and piece them all together until you know, until you get this revelation or all the puzzle pieces are combined. And then you go, oh, actually that I can see how that fits together or how that makes sense now. And until that point, it's just like, well, you just take it as the given.
I mean, if you listen to testimonies of people who have come from abusive backgrounds, they always think that their life is normal when they're a kid because what is normal for you, you think is normal.
Yes.
I mean, that's what your grid is for the normal life is what you've experienced. It's not until you get out of there and you see that there are other versions of normal that don't really match
Yes.
that you start to notice.
That's right. So when did you sort of really click onto it? How old were you when you finally went, okay, I was involved in that and it's impacted me?
Well, I didn't really early on. I struggled. Like I left home, moved to university, and in university I was very committed, very driven, scored really, really well, but was really struggling. Like I was drinking heavily. I was very much alone for a start. So, you know, coping with being alone, but then also just all this stuff would come up and I was drinking, was smoking weed, had a friend who was more than willing to help facilitate and engage with that. Yeah, and then I was in a church because I still very much was trying to follow after God, was trying to be a committed Christian and build my relationship with him.
Can I step back just for a minute? One of the key things that I can remember with Leah's story is that throughout the process of her, what do you want to say, training or indoctrination or the systematic breakdown of who she was as an individual to fulfill the generational assignment or purpose or whatever to belong to this cult, to be a part of this cult, is that somehow, and which I'm very still grateful for, is that she had a recognition or a sense that it's not supposed to be this way. And I remember one of her stories that she told with the church hopping was that there was an elderly lady that would, and it was only for a short period, I think, what was it, about 12 months or 18 months, and you went with her, or you and some of your siblings went with her, and she gave you cookies, and it was like Sunday school, stuff like that. And she looks back on that time in all that period of, whether you want to say bleakness or darkness, where it was something different. It was a different expression of God, because a lot of the stories that I've heard, or like I remember, is that her father was very, very controlling, and that was like the exclusive brethren doctrine. When we were engaged and we went there to meet the rest of the family, there's a lock on the pantry door, and it's just, and the house is very, very dark and very, very cold and very, very foreboding. So it just, despite all of that upbringing, that there were indicators, Leah had a sense that this is not the way that it's supposed to be. I don't know how it's supposed to be, but it's not supposed to be this way. And there were, at least like with that one individual, with that woman, she reflected the truer heart, the truer nature of Jesus.
And she did. It was actually a couple. And our family, I was very young. Our family, I don't think, was in church at that time. And they would come and pick us up, myself and my brothers and sisters. And there was a little church up the corner from our house. And they would take us there and they would read us Bible stories and we would sing songs and they would give us stickers and give us cookies. And there was just something about them. They were so
loving,
just kind. Yeah, they were just warm and kind and had this lightness about them that, like Kris just said, we didn't have in our home. Like our home was very dark in, the tone of it, but also spiritually, I think there was probably also a lot of, darkness in that sense. So they were very much different to what I'd experienced. So, when people say, well, how do you know Jesus, or why did you seek after Jesus? And I really think that couple was a big part of it because they showed me different.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they showed me different. And I remember as a teenager just crying out to God because I knew that things were wrong. I knew that they were wrong, but I didn't know how to change them and I didn't know what needed to be different. But I just remember sitting on my bedroom floor just begging him, don't make it stay this way. Like, show me what to do to change. Sorry, I get a bit teary just remembering that time. Show me, fix this, change it, and just begging and begging and begging time and time again. Like at that time, I think I felt really betrayed by God because nothing really changed. I was still in that, not knowing what my childhood really was, but knowing that something was fundamentally not right and trying to fix it myself. I couldn't, and just crying out to him to change it. Went to this church, tried to get connected there, and eventually got went to get baptized. Now, I had been baptized as a child or as a teenager with a youth group, but wanted to get baptized again, and I made the decision and I went to do it. But I remember that night I came home, and at that stage I was living with my grandmother in my grandmother's apartment, and not a Christian. She wasn't a Christian. And it's like I had to fight to survive. It's like I wanted to take my own life and I didn't understand why. Like this desire to kill myself was so strong and I couldn't understand because I'd just been baptized. I'd just gone and I just, God, I love you. I want to live my life according to your plan. I struggled and struggled and struggled and was back and forth and sobbing and, cutting myself and just trying I don't want to do this. What's going on? And eventually I just got myself so drunk that I couldn't do anything because it's the only way I knew how to fight it. And now I look back at that time and I understand that was all the stuff in me that was fighting against God.
Because you were choosing God.
Because I was choosing God, intentionally choosing God at that time with no understanding of what I carried or no understanding of what my past had been. So, of course, it was confusing time because I didn't understand the fight. I didn't understand this struggle.
Yeah, the demonic was fighting against God.
Absolutely. And it was just such a horrendous time. And then at the age of 25, we still hadn't met. Kris and I attempted to take my own life. I just had this voice that just constantly said to me, you're not going to make it past 25. You're not going to make it past 25. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I've got a job. I've got friends. It's all good. You're not going to make it past 25. And then at one stage in the church that I was in, some stuff had been said by the pastor to me, and it just absolutely broke me. And it's like I just went into this, like just this trance kind of thing where I just went, I'm done. I can't fight anymore. I just can't do this. It's just so hard. And something in me just clicked, and I went home and took tablets, got myself drunk, cut both my wrists, and I was done. It's too hard. And somebody came and found me and rushed me to hospital. I was already unconscious by the time I got there, and that pumped my stomach, and I was in a psych ward for 3 days. But even then, after that, I still had no support. My family didn't come. I had nobody.
I still can't believe that.
But that's how it was.
Yes, yeah.
I was released from hospital, went back to the place I was living at the time, and was on my own and had to make a decision with knowing nothing that we know now. Had to make a decision. Do I want to do this? Do I want to live anymore or not? So, there were always signs that something wasn't right. So, yeah, like it's not normal for somebody who's raised in a seemingly average functional home, especially if they're raised in church or in Christian circles, to be struggling with this stuff, to be dealing with, using alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism, to be cutting as a coping mechanism, but then to struggle so much with the very act of baptism and then suicide. So going through all of that, about 1.5 years after my suicide attempt, 1.5 years, 2 years, I was starting to get my life back on track, really committed to following God and trying to just get past all of that, adamant that I was just not going to be with anybody. Life was better if I was just on my own. And at that point, that's when Kris wandered into my world right at the time where I didn't want him.
Which was fine because I wasn't really looking for her either, actually. So.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens with us married couples. But we're just about out of time. So what we might do is wrap up here, but we want to hear more. And so we will definitely continue this story in next week's episode or in a coming episode. So just keep track of that.
Stay tuned, everyone.
That's it. You've been listening to the Kingfisher Podcast with Eric and Bron Whitley. Thanks for joining us today. And we just hope that the things that you're hearing today encourage you and point you more to Jesus. We just pray that you have a very blessed day.